Thunder rolled across the black sky like the growl of an angry beast. Rain fell in cold sheets over the mountains, turning dirt roads into rivers of mud. Deep inside forbidden rogue territory, far from the protection of any lawful pack, hundreds of wolves gathered beneath flickering torchlight. This was not a market. It was not a festival. It was not a place where honest wolves came to trade. This was the auction of the forgotten. A place where unwanted wolves were bought and sold like objects. A place where mercy did not exist. Iron cages lined the center of the clearing. Some held criminals. Some held debtors. Some held abandoned omegas. And some held wolves who had simply been unlucky enough to cross the wrong alpha. The crowd moved from cage to cage, examining prisoners as if they were livestock. Laughter echoed through the storm. Cruel jokes filled the air. The smell of fear was everywhere. Inside one of the smallest cages sat a young omega named Lyra Ashwood. Her clothes were torn. Her bare feet were covered in dirt. Purple bruises marked her arms. Fresh cuts crossed her wrists where iron chains had rubbed against her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself and tried not to cry. She had already cried too much. The tears never changed anything. The tears never stopped the pain. The tears never made anyone care. At 21 years old, Lyra had learned one painful truth. The world had decided long ago that she did not matter. A drunk rogue stopped in front of her cage. He grabbed the bars. Pretty little thing. Several wolves laughed. Another stepped closer. She'll fetch a good price. Not much use for fighting. But she's young. More laughter followed. Lyra lowered her eyes. She had heard it all before. To them she wasn't a person. She was a product. A thing. Something to buy. Something to own. The auction had not even started yet, and already she felt pieces of herself breaking apart. A loud crack suddenly echoed nearby. Lyra looked up. A small wolf pup stumbled across the muddy ground carrying a heavy wooden crate. He couldn't have been older than 8. His clothes hung loosely from his thin frame. His face was pale from hunger. The crate slipped from his hands. It crashed into the mud. Instantly a rogue guard stormed forward. "You useless brat." The guard struck the child across the face. The little pup fell hard. Gasps spread through a few nearby prisoners. The boy didn't cry. That somehow made it worse. He simply curled into himself and waited for the next blow. The guard grabbed him by the collar. "You cost me money." The boy shook with fear. "I'm sorry." The rogue raised his hand again. Lyra's stomach twisted. She knew that feeling. She knew exactly what it meant to wait for pain and know nobody would stop it. The smart choice was to stay silent. The safe choice was to look away. The safe choice was survival. But Lyra had never been very good at protecting herself. Without thinking, she stood. "Stop." The guard turned. His eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" Lyra swallowed hard. Fear squeezed her chest. Still she forced the words out. "He's just a child." The rogue laughed. The crowd laughed with him. The guard slowly approached her cage. "You want to tell me how to do my job?" "No." "Then be quiet." The boy looked toward Lyra with wide, frightened eyes. The sight broke her heart. She shook her head. "Please." The guard's face darkened. That single word sealed her fate. He unlocked the cage. Before Lyra could move, he dragged her outside. Rain soaked her instantly. The crowd gathered eagerly. Nothing entertained rogues more than suffering. The guard threw her to her knees. "You think you're brave." Lyra remained silent. The first lash struck her back. Pain exploded through her body. She gasped. The second strike landed harder. The third nearly knocked her into the mud. The crowd cheered. The little boy screamed. "Stop. Please stop." The guard only laughed. Lyra could barely breathe. Every nerve in her body burned. But she looked toward the child. And somehow she smiled. A tiny smile. A reassuring smile. As if she wanted him to know he wasn't alone. The boy's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in months, someone had suffered for him. Someone had cared. The guard raised the whip again. Then suddenly, Silence. The cheering stopped. The laughter disappeared. The entire market froze. Even the storm seemed quieter. Confused, Lyra slowly lifted her head. A long line of black armored riders had entered the clearing. Each carried the crest of the Northern Kingdom. The crowd immediately stepped aside. Fear spread through the rogues. Several dropped to one knee. Others lowered their heads. The guard holding the whip suddenly looked terrified. A massive black carriage rolled through the muddy road. Its silver wolf crest gleamed beneath flashes of lightning. Everyone knew that crest. Everyone. Because only one wolf in the world carried it. The Alpha King. Kael Draven. The ruler of all northern territories. The strongest alpha alive. The Wolf Kings feared him. His enemies avoided speaking his name. Stories about him traveled across continents. Some called him ruthless. Others called him legendary. Many called him unstoppable. The carriage stopped. The door opened. A large black boot touched the ground. Then he emerged. Tall. Powerful. Commanding. His dark coat moved in the wind. His presence alone seemed to crush the air around him. No one spoke. No one dared. Kael Draven slowly surveyed the market. His silver eyes missed nothing. Every cage. Every prisoner. Every rogue. Every drop of blood. The auction master rushed forward and bowed deeply. Your Majesty. Kael didn't answer. The rogue swallowed nervously. We didn't expect your visit. Still no answer. The Alpha King's gaze continued moving through the crowd. Then it stopped. On Lyra. For a moment she forgot how to breathe. She had never seen someone like him. Power seemed to radiate from his very existence. Yet it wasn't his strength that shocked her. It was his eyes. They were cold. Controlled. Unreadable. But somehow they seemed older than the mountains. Older than the storms. As if they carried burdens nobody else could see. Kael's gaze moved over the fresh wounds on her back. The bruises on her wrists. The mud on her knees. Then his eyes shifted toward the frightened child standing nearby. A strange expression flickered across his face. Gone almost instantly. But Lyra saw it. Recognition. Interest. Something. The Alpha King took one slow step forward. The crowd watched nervously. The rogue guard backed away. Nobody understood why Kael had stopped. Among hundreds of prisoners, why was he looking at her? Lyra lowered her eyes. She was nobody. An omega. A discarded wolf. Nothing more. Yet she could still feel his gaze. Heavy. Unmoving. Watching. The auction master forced a smile. Just another omega, Your Majesty. Kael finally spoke. His voice was calm. Deep. Dangerously quiet. Is she? The simple question made the rogue pale. No one answered. Kael continued staring at Lyra. She expected disgust. Pity. Indifference. Instead she saw curiosity. And somehow that frightened her more. Because nobody had ever looked at her that way before. Lightning flashed across the sky. Thunder exploded overhead. The Alpha King turned away. The moment ended. But something had changed. Lyra felt it. The crowd felt it. Even the little wolf pup felt it. For reasons nobody understood, the most powerful alpha in the world had noticed a forgotten omega. And nothing would ever be the same again. The auction master quickly ordered preparations to continue. The crowd slowly relaxed. Conversations resumed. Yet whispers spread everywhere. Why did he stop? Did you see that? He was staring at her. Impossible. She's just an omega. But Lyra could not stop trembling. She returned to her cage. The little boy approached the bars carefully. His cheek was still red from the beating. Thank you. Lyra smiled softly. You don't need to thank me. You got hurt because of me. No. She shook her head. I got hurt because he was cruel. The boy looked down. Nobody had ever spoken to him like that. What is your name? Finn. I'm Lyra. The child managed a tiny smile. For the first time all night, hope appeared in his eyes. And somehow that frightened Lyra. Hope was dangerous. Hope could break a heart faster than despair. Still, she couldn't stop herself. She reached through the bars. Finn took her hand. A small gesture. A simple moment. Yet neither of them knew they had just found the family they desperately needed. Across the market, standing beside his carriage, Alpha King Kael watched the scene. And for reasons he could not explain. He continued watching. The storm continued long into the night. Rain hammered against the roofs of wooden buildings surrounding the rogue auction grounds. Torches hissed beneath the falling water, sending smoke twisting into the darkness. Inside her cage, Lyra sat quietly beside the iron bars. Her back still burned from the whipping. Every movement hurt. Every breath reminded her of the pain. Yet her thoughts were focused on something else entirely. The Alpha King. Why had he looked at her that way? Why had he stopped? The questions wouldn't leave her mind. Across the market, merchants shouted prices while guards dragged prisoners from cage to cage. The auction was finally beginning. One by one, captives were brought forward. Bids were shouted. Coins exchanged hands. Families were separated. Lives were sold. The entire process felt cold and cruel. Lyra forced herself not to watch. She had already accepted her fate. Soon it would be her turn. Soon some stranger would own her. And there would be nothing she could do. A loud bell rang through the market. The auction master climbed onto a wooden platform. His smile stretched across his face like a hungry wolf. Ladies and gentlemen. Cheers erupted. Tonight we have rare merchandise from every corner of the continent. More cheering followed. The prisoners remained silent. Most stared at the ground. Others cried quietly. A few looked completely broken. The auction master pointed toward the first cage. Bring out the warrior. Chains rattled. A large wolf was dragged onto the stage. The bidding started immediately. Prices climbed higher and higher. Within minutes he was sold. Then another prisoner. Then another. Hours seemed to pass. The rain slowed. The moon briefly appeared between clouds. Lyra watched as cage after cage emptied. Each sale made her stomach tighten. Her turn was getting closer. Very close. Beside her, Finn sat curled against the bars. The little pup looked exhausted. Hungry. Afraid. Every now and then he glanced toward her. As if checking she was still there. Lyra offered him a small smile. It was all she could give. You should rest. Finn shook his head. I'm scared. The honesty in his voice broke her heart. She understood that feeling. She knew it too well. What are you scared of? The child looked toward the stage. What if they take us somewhere bad? Lyra hesitated. She wanted to promise everything would be okay. But she couldn't. Not honestly. Instead she gently squeezed his hand. Then we'll be brave. Finn looked uncertain. What if I'm not brave? You are. No, I'm not. You are. The child frowned. How do you know? A faint smile appeared on Lyra's face. Because you're still standing. For a moment Finn simply stared at her. Then something changed. The fear didn't disappear. But it became smaller. Just a little. Sometimes courage wasn't the absence of fear. Sometimes courage was continuing despite it. And Lyra understood that better than anyone. Suddenly movement near the royal carriage caught her attention. Alpha King Kael stood beside several commanders. The men were speaking quietly. Yet even from a distance, everyone gave him space. Power surrounded him like an invisible force. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't threatening anyone. He didn't need to. His presence alone commanded obedience. One commander handed him a document. Kael glanced at it briefly. Then his eyes lifted. And once again. They landed on Lyra. Her breath caught. The distance between them was enormous. Yet somehow she felt exposed. Seen. The feeling made her uncomfortable. Nobody had ever paid attention to her before. Why was he doing it now? Kael's expression remained unreadable. A second later he returned his attention to the report. But the moment lingered. Something about it felt important. Dangerously important. The auction continued. More prisoners were sold. More lives changed forever. Then finally the auction master raised his hand. Next. A guard approached Lyra's cage. Her heartbeat immediately accelerated. This was it. The moment she had been dreading. The guard unlocked the cage door. Move. Lyra slowly stood. Pain shot through her back. She nearly stumbled. Finn instantly grabbed her sleeve. Fear filled his eyes. Lyra. The child looked like he might cry. She knelt beside him. It's okay. No, it's not. His voice trembled. Please don't go. Those words hit harder than any whip. For a second she couldn't speak. Nobody had ever asked her to stay before. Nobody had ever needed her. But this little boy did. She gently touched his cheek. Be strong, Finn. The child shook his head desperately. Please. The guard yanked her arm. Move. Lyra rose to her feet. Every step toward the stage felt heavier than the last. The crowd watched eagerly. She could hear their whispers. Their laughter. Their judgment. She felt smaller with every passing second. The auction master grinned. Now this is a special one. Several buyers leaned forward. Young. More interest spread through the crowd. Healthy. The bidding area grew louder. And very beautiful. The audience erupted with excitement. Lyra lowered her eyes. Humiliation burned inside her. She hated this. Hated every second. Hated being displayed like an object. But she remained silent. The auction master grabbed her chin and forced her face upward. Look at that. Several bidders nodded approvingly. Perfect servant. Perfect omega. Good breeding stock. The comments made her stomach turn. The bidding began. 500 silver. 700. 1,000. 1,500. The numbers rose rapidly. The crowd grew excited. Every new bid felt like another chain around her neck. Lyra closed her eyes. She couldn't listen anymore. She couldn't bear it. The voices blended together. The prices climbed higher. 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 Then suddenly. Silence. The entire market went quiet. Lyra slowly opened her eyes. Confusion spread through the crowd. Several bidders stared toward the royal section. Shock appeared on every face. The auction master swallowed hard. Why, Your Majesty? Kael Draven stood. The movement alone silenced hundreds of wolves. The Alpha King looked toward the stage. Toward Lyra. His expression remained calm. Controlled. Yet his eyes never left her. Then he spoke. One number. A single bid. The amount echoed across the market. For a moment nobody reacted. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The sum was enormous. Far beyond Lyra's value. Far beyond reason. Several wealthy buyers exchanged stunned looks. No one challenged him. No one dared. Because this wasn't simply money. It was a statement. The Alpha King had chosen. The auction master recovered first. Sold. His hammer slammed onto the platform. The sound echoed through the night. Just like that. Lyra belonged to Alpha King Kael. Gasps spread everywhere. Whispers exploded through the crowd. Why? What's happening? She's just an omega. Why would he pay that much? No one understood. Least of all Lyra. Fear rushed through her chest. She had expected a cruel owner. A violent owner. A selfish owner. Instead she had been purchased by the most powerful alpha in existence. And somehow that frightened her even more. Because she couldn't understand his motives. The unknown was always terrifying. The auction master hurried toward Kael. Your Majesty, excellent choice. Kael ignored him. His eyes remained fixed on Lyra. Finally he spoke. Bring her. 2 simple words. Yet every guard immediately obeyed. Then Kael looked toward another cage. Toward Finn. The little pup froze. Fear filled his face. The Alpha King's gaze lingered for several seconds. Then he spoke again. Him too. The crowd exploded into whispers. Even the guards looked confused. The child wasn't valuable. He wasn't important. Why would the Alpha King want him? Finn stared in disbelief. Lyra stared too. For the first time since arriving at the auction, genuine confusion replaced her fear. Why was he helping the child? Why was he helping either of them? The guards moved quickly. Finn was brought forward. The child immediately rushed toward Lyra. His small hand grabbed hers. He refused to let go. No one stopped him. Kael watched silently. Something unreadable flickered in his silver eyes. Approval. Perhaps. Or maybe recognition. The Alpha King turned toward his carriage. Prepare to leave. His commanders obeyed immediately. The auction master bowed repeatedly. The crowd parted. Yet as Lyra stood there holding Finn's hand, a strange feeling began growing inside her chest. Not happiness. Not yet. She wasn't capable of that. Not after everything. But perhaps something smaller. Something fragile. Something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. And that frightened her more than anything. Because hope could change a life. Or destroy it. As royal guards escorted them toward the waiting carriage, Lyra glanced once more toward the Alpha King. For reasons she could not explain, Kael looked back. Their eyes met. Only for a second. Yet something passed between them. Something neither fully understood. A silent promise. A silent question. A silent beginning. Neither of them knew it yet. But the path that started tonight would shake an entire kingdom. And before it ended, it would transform a forgotten Omega into something the world never expected. The future Luna. But first, she would have to survive the darkness waiting ahead. And the darkness was already watching. Far away, inside a luxurious estate, a beautiful woman named Seraphine listened as a messenger delivered shocking news. The Alpha King had purchased an Omega. The smile vanished from her face. And jealousy began to burn. The war for Lyra's future had just begun. The journey away from the rogue auction began before sunrise. Dark clouds still covered the sky as the royal convoy prepared to leave the cursed market behind. Dozens of elite royal guards mounted their horses. Black banners bearing the crest of the Northern Kingdom waved in the cold wind. The rogue traders stood aside silently. Nobody dared interfere. Nobody dared question the Alpha King. Because everyone understood one thing. When Kael Draven made a decision, the world adjusted around it. Not the other way around. Lyra stood beside the transport wagon, her wrists still trapped inside heavy iron restraints. The chains felt colder than before. Maybe because she now understood how close freedom truly was. Or maybe because she had begun hoping for something better. And hope always made suffering harder to bear. Beside her stood Finn. The little wolf pup refused to leave her side. His small fingers clung tightly to her torn sleeve. As if letting go might cause her to disappear. A royal guard approached. Move. Lyra obeyed immediately. Years of mistreatment had trained her not to argue. Not to resist. Not to attract attention. The guard reached for her chains. Before he could continue, a calm voice cut through the morning air. Stop. Everything froze. The guard immediately stepped back. Kael Draven was approaching. The Alpha King's boots crushed wet gravel beneath his feet. His silver eyes briefly studied the restraints around Lyra's wrists. For a moment his expression did not change. Then his gaze dropped to the wounds beneath the metal. Fresh blood stained her skin. The chains had cut deeply. Kael's jaw tightened. A dangerous silence followed. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the guards looked nervous. Slowly, Kael stepped closer. Lyra lowered her eyes. Fear instantly returned. Had she done something wrong? Was he angry? She couldn't tell. The Alpha King stopped directly in front of her. For the first time she truly understood how powerful he was. He seemed larger up close. Stronger. Like a mountain standing before a storm. His shadow covered her completely. Then his gaze settled on her wrists. What happened? The question surprised her. Nobody had ever asked that before. Nobody had ever cared. Lyra hesitated. Her voice came out weak. The chains. Kael looked at the wounds again. Something dark flickered behind his eyes. Anger. Real anger. But not directed at her. The Alpha King slowly reached forward. Every guard in the area watched carefully. The rogue auction master watched too. Nobody understood what was happening. Kael wrapped one hand around the iron bars of the transport cage. His fingers tightened. The metal groaned. A second later. Crack. The sound echoed across the entire market. Gasps erupted everywhere. The cage door twisted violently. Then tore completely away. As if it had been made from paper. Silence followed. Absolute silence. The rogue traders stared in disbelief. The guards looked stunned. Even Lyra forgot how to breathe. The Alpha King had ripped apart solid iron with his bare hands. Kael tossed the destroyed door aside. The heavy metal crashed into the mud. Then he turned toward the guards. His voice remained calm. But somehow that made it even more terrifying. No wolf under my protection wears chains. The words struck the crowd harder than thunder. No wolf under my protection. Lyra's heart skipped. Protection. Nobody had ever used that word for her before. Not once. The guards immediately unlocked her restraints. The iron cuffs fell away. For a moment Lyra simply stared at her wrists. She couldn't move. Couldn't think. Couldn't believe it. The weight was gone. The chains were gone. For the first time in years. She was free. Not truly free. Not yet. But freer than she had been yesterday. A strange feeling rose inside her chest. Warm. Painful. Almost overwhelming. Finn suddenly wrapped his arms around her. They're gone. His voice trembled with happiness. The chains are gone. Lyra swallowed hard. Tears threatened to appear. She quickly looked away. She wasn't used to kindness. Kindness felt dangerous. Because kindness could disappear. And when it disappeared, the pain always felt worse. The convoy finally began moving. Horses pulled royal carriages along mountain roads. The rogue market slowly vanished behind them. Lyra sat quietly inside one of the transport wagons. Finn slept beside her. Exhaustion had finally overcome him. The little pup's head rested against her shoulder. For the first time since meeting him, he looked peaceful. Lyra smiled faintly. Then she carefully covered him with a blanket. Across from her sat two royal guards. Neither spoke much. Neither treated her badly. Which felt strange. She had spent so many years expecting cruelty that simple politeness felt unfamiliar. Hours passed. The forests grew thicker. The roads became safer. Still, Lyra remained nervous. She couldn't stop wondering why Kael had bought her. The question haunted every thought. Eventually the wagon slowed. A disturbance had appeared ahead. Several guards rode back toward the convoy. Instantly everyone became alert. Weapons were drawn. Orders were shouted. Lyra's pulse quickened. Danger. The atmosphere changed immediately. A few moments later Kael rode forward. His massive black horse moved effortlessly through the trees. Commanders gathered around him. Reports were exchanged. The Alpha King's face remained unreadable. Then something unexpected happened. His gaze moved toward Lyra's wagon. Toward her. Not the commanders. Not the soldiers. Her. The moment lasted only seconds. Then he returned to discussing strategy. Yet Lyra noticed. So did the guards. And so did the soldiers nearby. The Alpha King kept checking on the Omega. Whispers quietly began spreading through the convoy. Nobody understood why. By sunset the convoy stopped near a river. Camp was established quickly. Tents appeared. Fires were lit. Food was prepared. For most wolves, it was simply another evening. For Lyra, it felt completely different. Because nobody ordered her to work. Nobody insulted her. Nobody threw food at her feet. A servant actually handed her a warm meal. She stared at the bowl. Confused. The servant smiled politely. Enjoy. Then he walked away. Lyra blinked several times. Finn immediately started eating. The child looked delighted. This is good. She nodded slowly. Very slowly. As if afraid the food might disappear. Far across the camp, Kael sat beside a fire reviewing reports. His commanders discussed borders, rogues, and political matters. But every now and then his attention shifted. Toward Lyra. Toward Finn. Toward the strange pair sitting quietly beneath the stars. One commander finally noticed. "Your Majesty." Kael looked up. The older warrior hesitated. "May I ask something?" "Ask." The commander cleared his throat. "Why her?" Several officers immediately looked uncomfortable. Nobody usually questioned the Alpha King. Kael remained silent. His eyes drifted toward Lyra again. She was helping Finn eat. Patiently. Gently. The child smiled every few seconds. As if simply being near her made him feel safe. Finally Kael answered. She protected someone weaker than herself. The commanders exchanged glances. Kael continued. Most warriors protect strength. His silver eyes narrowed slightly. She protected weakness. Nobody responded. Because they understood. Strength was common. Power was common. Fearlessness was common among alphas. But compassion. True compassion. That was rare. Very rare. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, another conversation was taking place. Inside a magnificent estate decorated with gold and silver, Lunar Seraphine stood before a messenger. The messenger kept his head lowered. Fear covered his scent. Because Seraphine's mood was terrible. "You are certain?" "Yes, my lady." The messenger swallowed. The reports came directly from the auction. Seraphine's beautiful face hardened. "And the Omega?" "Purchased by the Alpha King." Silence. A long dangerous silence. Then, crash. A crystal glass shattered against the wall. The messenger flinched. Seraphine slowly turned away. Her hands trembled with rage. For years she had been preparing to become Kael's Luna. For years every noble family expected it. For years she had positioned herself perfectly. And now an Omega nobody had ever heard of was receiving the Alpha King's attention. It was unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. Find out everything. Her voice sounded cold enough to freeze water. Everything. The messenger nodded rapidly. "Yes, my lady." When he finally left, Seraphine walked toward a large window. Moonlight illuminated her face. Beneath her beauty lived something dangerous. Ambition. Jealousy. Pride. She had spent her entire life obtaining what she wanted. And she refused to lose now. Especially not to an Omega. Her eyes narrowed. "I don't know who you are." The words left her lips like poison. "But I will remove you." Back at the royal camp, Lyra sat beside a small fire. Finn had already fallen asleep. The stars shone above them. For the first time in a very long time, she felt safe. Not completely. Not enough to relax. But safer than before. A soft sound interrupted her thoughts. Footsteps. Lyra looked up. Her heart nearly stopped. Kael stood a few feet away. Alone. Without guards. Without commanders. Without ceremony. Just the Alpha King. She immediately rose. "Enno." Kael's voice stopped her. "You can sit." Lyra froze. Slowly she obeyed. An awkward silence followed. Neither seemed certain what to say. Finally Kael glanced toward the sleeping child. "He trusts you." Lyra looked at Finn. A sad smile touched her lips. "I think he just needs someone." Kael studied her carefully. "And you?" The question surprised her. "What? Do you need someone?" The word struck deeper than either of them expected. Lyra looked away. Her eyes suddenly burned. Because nobody had ever asked that question before. Nobody. Not once. For a moment she couldn't answer. Then she whispered the truth. "I stopped hoping for that a long time ago." Silence followed. Heavy silence. The kind that carried meaning. Kael's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. Most wolves would never notice. But Lyra did. For the first time, She saw something beyond the Alpha King. Beyond the ruler. Beyond the warrior. She saw a man. And somehow that frightened her more than his power ever could. Because power could hurt you. But kindness. Kindness could reach places pain never could. Kael eventually stood. We reached the capital in 3 days. Lyra nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. He hesitated briefly, then turned away. But before leaving, he spoke one final sentence. A sentence Lyra would remember forever. You are safe here. Then he walked into the darkness, leaving Lyra staring after him. And for the first time since her world had fallen apart, she almost believed him. 3 days later, the capital of the Northern Kingdom appeared beyond the horizon. Lyra had never seen anything so beautiful. Massive stone walls stretched toward the sky. Silver banners danced in the wind. Hundreds of towers rose above the city like giants watching over the kingdom. Sunlight reflected from marble buildings, making the entire capital seem as if it had been carved from light itself. The royal convoy approached the gates. Trumpets sounded. Royal guards straightened immediately. Citizens lined the streets. Many bowed as Alpha King Kael entered the city. Others cheered his name. Long live the Alpha King. Long live Kael Draven. The voices echoed everywhere. Lyra sat quietly inside the carriage beside Finn. The little pup pressed his face against the window. His eyes widened. It's huge. A small smile touched Lyra's lips. Yes. Finn pointed excitedly. Look. Children ran through the streets. Merchants sold food. Musicians played songs. For a moment the city looked peaceful. Happy. Alive. A world completely different from the darkness they had escaped. Yet despite its beauty, unease settled in Lyra's stomach. Because places this grand often hid dangerous secrets. And she was about to discover how true that was. The convoy entered the royal palace grounds. Everything changed immediately. The palace was enormous. White marble staircases. Golden fountains. Ancient statues. Gardens larger than entire villages. Lyra had never imagined such luxury could exist. She suddenly became very aware of her simple clothes. Her worn boots. The scars on her hands. She didn't belong here. The thought returned instantly. It followed her like a shadow. You don't belong here. The carriage stopped. Servants rushed forward. Guards formed lines. Nobles gathered near the entrance. Kael stepped out first. Everyone bowed. Then Lyra emerged. The reaction was immediate. Confused whispers spread through the crowd. Eyes locked onto her. Judging. Questioning. Mocking. She felt it instantly. Some things never changed. A noblewoman frowned. Who is she? Another answered quietly. The Omega. The one from the auction. Disapproval spread quickly. Many nobles looked offended. Others looked amused. A few appeared openly hostile. Finn moved closer to Lyra. The child sensed the tension immediately. His small hand found hers. She squeezed it gently. Neither noticed Kael watching. The Alpha King's gaze darkened slightly. He had expected resistance. But seeing it directed toward Lyra irritated him more than he expected. The feeling surprised even him. Kael turned toward a palace steward. Prepare rooms. The steward bowed. Of course, Your Majesty. Kael glanced toward Lyra. Separate chambers. Several nobles exchanged surprised looks. Separate chambers. Inside the royal palace. The rumors would spread instantly. Kael ignored them. He was used to gossip. What interested him more was something else. The mystery surrounding Lyra. Because during the journey he had quietly ordered an investigation. And the results made no sense. None at all. That evening, after everyone settled into their rooms, Kael sat alone inside his private study. Ancient maps covered the walls. Documents filled his desk. A trusted investigator stood nearby. The older wolf looked troubled. Very troubled. Kael noticed immediately. What did you find? The investigator hesitated. Then he handed over several files. That is the problem, Your Majesty. Kael looked up. The problem? The investigator nodded. The records don't match. Kael opened the documents. His eyes moved across the pages. Slowly, carefully, the investigator continued. Every official report says Lyra Ashwood committed theft. Kael remained silent. But witnesses tell different stories. His silver eyes narrowed. Continue. Some claim she was innocent. Kael turned another page. Others claim evidence disappeared. Another page. Several records appear altered. Kael finally looked up. The investigator lowered his voice. It feels like someone intentionally erased the truth. Silence filled the room. Dangerous silence. Kael leaned back slowly. He trusted this investigator. The wolf never exaggerated. Never speculated. Which meant something was wrong. Very wrong. Someone powerful had targeted Lyra. The question was why. What could possibly make an Omega important enough to destroy? Elsewhere inside the palace, Lyra sat beside a window overlooking the gardens. The room felt unreal. The bed alone was larger than the space she once slept in. Fresh clothes had been provided. Warm food arrived regularly. No one shouted at her. No one struck her. No one ordered her around. It should have felt wonderful. Instead it felt strange. Because trauma does not disappear overnight. Pain teaches lessons. And Lyra had spent years learning them. Part of her kept waiting for the punishment. The cruelty. The betrayal. Surely it was coming. It always came. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened. Finn rushed inside. His face brightened immediately. Lyra. She smiled. There you are. The child climbed onto a chair. Excitement practically radiated from him. They gave me 3 desserts. Lyra laughed softly. 3. Finn nodded proudly. 3. The sight warmed her heart. For the first time since meeting him, he looked like a normal child. Not a prisoner. Not a servant. Just a child. The moment felt precious. Too precious. Which was why neither noticed another pair of eyes watching from the doorway. Kael. He had arrived quietly. And now stood observing them. Lyra looked different when she smiled. The sadness never fully disappeared. But for brief moments it retreated. Allowing the real woman beneath to emerge. Kael found himself staring longer than intended. Then Finn noticed him. Your Majesty. The child jumped upright. Kael entered. You seem happy. Finn grinned. They have desserts. Kael raised an eyebrow. A convincing argument. The boy nodded seriously. It is. For a moment, something unusual happened. The Alpha King smiled. Only slightly. But enough. Lyra noticed. And suddenly found herself unable to look away. Because she had never imagined Kael smiling. The expression transformed him. Made him seem younger. Warmer. Human. The moment ended quickly. Yet something lingered. A quiet connection. One neither understood. Far away, inside another wing of the palace, a carriage arrived. Servants rushed forward. Nobles gathered eagerly. A beautiful woman stepped onto the marble pathway. Lunar Seraphine. She moved gracefully. Confidently. Like someone born to command attention. And attention followed immediately. Many believed she would eventually become queen. Many expected her to marry Kael. Including Seraphine herself. A servant approached. My lady. Report. The servant swallowed. The Omega is here. Seraphine's smile vanished. And she remains under royal protection. A dangerous silence followed. Then Seraphine laughed softly. The sound held no warmth. No Omega remains protected forever. That night a grand dinner was held. Nobles from across the kingdom attended. Lyra had never experienced anything like it. The hall glittered with chandeliers. Music filled the air. Powerful wolves discussed politics and alliances. And nearly all of them stared at her. Judgment followed her everywhere. She hated it. Finn sat beside her. Thankfully. Without him she might have run away. Halfway through the evening, the great doors opened. Seraphine entered. The room immediately reacted. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Even Lyra could feel the woman's presence. Beautiful. Elegant. Dangerous. Their eyes met across the hall. A chill ran through Lyra's body. Instinct screamed a warning. Predator. Seraphine approached gracefully. Her smile appeared perfect. Flawless. False. Lyra. The Omega stood. My lady. Seraphine embraced her lightly. To everyone watching, the gesture looked friendly. Kind. Welcoming. Then she leaned closer. And whispered. Only for Lyra to hear. Leave. Lyra froze. Seraphine's smile never changed. Before you are buried. The words felt like ice. Then Seraphine stepped back. Still smiling. Still graceful. Still pretending. Nobody else noticed. Nobody except Kael. The Alpha King sat across the hall. Watching. Observing. And something about the exchange bothered him. Deeply. The evening continued. But tension now filled every moment. Lyra understood something important. The auction had been simple. Cruel. Brutal. Obvious. The palace was different. The palace wore masks. Smiles hid knives. Kind words hid threats. And somewhere inside those shadows, someone wanted her gone. The attack happened 2 nights later. A royal servant was discovered unconscious near the Eastern Gardens. The palace erupted instantly. Guards flooded the area. Healers arrived. Nobles demanded answers. Then the rumors began. Evidence was found. A torn piece of cloth. Footprints. Witness accounts. Every clue pointed toward one person. Lyra Ashwood. By morning the entire palace was talking. The accusations spread rapidly. Whispers followed her through every hallway. Suspicion filled every room. Fear returned. The same fear she thought she had escaped. The same nightmare repeating itself. And as Lyra stood alone in her room, listening to the rumors outside her door, a terrible realization settled into her heart. Someone had started the game. Someone had made the first move. And the battle for her future had finally begun. Far across the palace, hidden behind a curtain, Seraphine smiled. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. And this time, the Omega would not escape. Morning arrived beneath a sky covered in grey clouds. The palace looked beautiful from the outside. White marble towers touched the heavens. Silver banners danced in the wind. Fountains sparkled beneath the rising sun. Yet inside those magnificent walls, darkness was spreading. And that darkness had chosen a target. Lyra Ashwood. The rumors had traveled through the palace overnight. Servants whispered in hallways. Guards exchanged suspicious looks. Nobles discussed the scandal during breakfast. Everywhere Lyra went, she could feel eyes following her. Judging. Accusing. Condemning. The feeling was painfully familiar. Too familiar. As she walked through a corridor carrying a basket of books requested by the palace librarian, 2 noblewomen stopped talking when she approached. The silence said everything. One of them frowned. The other shook her head. Poor Alpha King. The words were quiet. But not quiet enough. Lyra heard them. He saves one Omega and she attacks a servant. The second woman sighed dramatically. Some wolves never change. The women walked away, leaving Lyra standing alone. Her chest tightened. Not because the accusations hurt, but because they reminded her of Moonclaw Pack. The same whispers. The same assumptions. The same judgment. Nobody asking questions. Nobody searching for truth. Just blame. Always blame. She lowered her eyes. For a moment she felt like the frightened Omega from before. The girl nobody defended. The girl nobody believed. The girl nobody wanted. Then a small hand slipped into hers. Lyra looked down. Finn. The child offered a determined expression. They're wrong. A weak smile appeared on her face. Finn. No. The little pup shook his head stubbornly. They're wrong. His voice carried more confidence than usual. Because unlike everyone else, Finn knew her. He knew her heart. He knew the kind of person she was. And that mattered. More than she realized. That afternoon, the royal court assembled. The injured servant had regained consciousness. Questions needed answers. Witnesses had been called. Evidence had been gathered. The hearing would determine Lyra's fate. Again. The massive courtroom filled quickly. Nobles occupied the front rows. Commanders stood near the walls. Royal advisors whispered among themselves. The atmosphere felt heavy, tense, like a storm waiting to break. At the center of the chamber stood Lyra. Alone. Her hands trembled slightly. Not because she was guilty, but because she knew how these situations ended. Truth rarely won. Power did. And she possessed very little power. At the far end of the room sat Alpha King Kael. His expression revealed nothing. Neither anger, nor support. Just silence. Dangerous silence. The hearing began. The injured servant stepped forward. A bandage covered her arm. Her eyes filled with carefully practiced tears. The performance was convincing. Very convincing. Tell us what happened. The servant lowered her head dramatically. I was working near the Eastern Gardens. The room remained silent. I saw Lady Lyra. She pointed directly toward the Omega. Many nobles immediately frowned. The servant continued. We argued. Lyra's eyes widened. Argued. She had never spoken to this woman before. Then she attacked me. Gasps spread throughout the court. Several nobles immediately started whispering. The servant began crying. I tried to run. Her voice cracked. But she struck me. The performance was flawless. Almost too flawless. Yet most people believed her instantly. Because lies become easier to accept when they match expectations. And many already expected the worst from Lyra. One advisor stepped forward. Do you deny these accusations? Every eye in the room shifted toward Lyra. Fear squeezed her chest. But she forced herself to speak. Yes. The advisor waited. Lyra swallowed hard. I didn't do it. Simple. Honest. True. Yet somehow it sounded weak compared to the servant's dramatic story. The advisor frowned. Can anyone support your claim? Silence. A painful silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The courtroom felt enormous. And Lyra felt very small. Exactly the way her enemies wanted. Then another witness stepped forward. A palace worker. I saw Lady Lyra near the gardens. More whispers. A second witness followed. I saw her walking away. More suspicion. More doubt. More pressure. Piece by piece, the trap tightened. Everything appeared convincing. Everything appeared planned. Because it was. Hidden among the spectators, Seraphine watched calmly. A small smile touched her lips. Everything was unfolding perfectly. The Omega was trapped. Soon Kael would have no choice. Soon the kingdom would reject her. Soon she would disappear. Exactly as intended. Across the room, Kael remained silent. But his eyes never left Lyra. He studied her carefully. Every movement. Every reaction. Every word. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Not with the evidence. With Lyra. She wasn't reacting like a guilty wolf. She wasn't making excuses. Wasn't blaming others. Wasn't trying to manipulate emotions. She simply stood there. Terrified. Yet honest. As though truth was the only weapon she possessed. The realization bothered him. Deeply. Then the advisor spoke again. Lady Lyra, is there anything else you wish to say? A long pause followed. Lyra looked around the room. At the suspicious faces. The judgment. The disappointment. The hostility. A familiar ache filled her chest. She had seen this before. Lived this before. Lost everything because of it before. Still. She refused to lie. I didn't hurt anyone. Her voice remained soft, but steady. I never would. Silence followed. A few nobles rolled their eyes. Others looked unconvinced. The trap was working. Exactly as Seraphine intended. Then suddenly, a small voice echoed through the chamber. She's telling the truth. The courtroom froze. Heads turned. Shock spread instantly. Because the voice belonged to Finn. The little pup stepped forward. Alone. Terrified. Yet determined. Several nobles looked annoyed. Others looked surprised. The advisor frowned. This hearing does not concern children. It does. The words escaped Finn before fear could stop him. The room fell silent again. The child swallowed hard. His legs visibly shook. Yet he continued walking forward. Toward the center of the courtroom. Toward danger. Toward powerful wolves who could crush him without effort. Lyra's eyes widened. Finn. The child looked at her. Then toward the court. Then toward Kael. Finally he spoke. I saw someone. A ripple moved through the room. The advisor leaned forward. What do you mean? Finn took a deep breath. The night the servant got hurt. Everyone listened. The child continued. I couldn't sleep. Silence. So I went outside. More silence. I saw another woman near the gardens. The tension instantly increased. Seraphine's smile faded slightly. Only slightly. But enough. The advisor narrowed his eyes. Another woman. Finn nodded. She was arguing with the servant. The room exploded into whispers. Lyra stared in shock. Kael's attention sharpened immediately. The advisor raised his hand for silence. What woman? Finn hesitated. Fear returned. Because suddenly everyone was staring. Everyone. The pressure was enormous. The child looked terrified. Lyra immediately stepped forward. You don't have to. I do. Finn's voice surprised everyone, including himself. The little pup clenched his fists, then pointed toward the noble section, toward a group of elegant women, toward the shadows, toward the place where Seraphine Saturday. Gasps erupted. The atmosphere changed instantly. Danger flooded the room. Pure danger. Finn's voice trembled. But the words still came. It was her. For the first time all day, Seraphine stopped smiling. And somewhere deep inside the palace, the first crack appeared in her perfect plan. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Nobles shouted. Guards exchanged looks. Advisors demanded order. Questions exploded from every direction. But amidst all the noise, one thing had become clear. The case was no longer simple. The evidence was no longer unquestionable. Doubt had entered the room. And doubt was dangerous. Especially for those hiding the truth. Kael slowly rose from his throne. The movement alone silenced everyone. His silver eyes moved toward Finn. Then toward Lyra. Then finally toward Seraphine. Nobody could read his expression. But everyone felt it. Something had changed. The Alpha King was no longer simply observing. He was investigating. And when Kael Draven started searching for truth, secrets rarely survived. As the courtroom slowly settled into uneasy silence, a royal guard suddenly entered through the main doors. Breathing hard. Holding several documents. The guard knelt immediately. Your Majesty. Kael's eyes narrowed. What is it? The guard swallowed. We found another witness. A ripple spread through the room. The hearing wasn't over. Not even close. In fact, it was only beginning. And before this battle ended, the entire kingdom would learn just how far someone had gone to destroy a forgotten Omega. Someone powerful. Someone dangerous. Someone who still believed she controlled the game. But the truth was moving now. And the truth could not be chained forever. The royal courtroom stood frozen. Not a single voice could be heard. Not a single noble dared speak. The silence felt heavy. Dangerous. The kind of silence that came before a storm. Finn stood in the center of the chamber, trembling from head to toe. His small chest rose and fell rapidly. Fear filled his scent. Yet somehow he remained standing. Because for the first time in his life, someone worth protecting stood behind him. Lyra. The Omega who had taken a whipping for him. The Omega who had shared her food. The Omega who had treated him like he mattered. And Finn refused to let her stand alone. Across the courtroom, Seraphine's expression remained calm. Almost calm. But beneath the mask, anger was beginning to boil. The child was becoming a problem. A serious problem. Alpha King Kael slowly looked toward the royal guard who had entered moments earlier. The guard still knelt before the throne. Several documents rested in his hands. "We found another witness, Your Majesty." Every eye turned toward him. Kael's voice remained steady. "Bring them in." The massive courtroom doors opened. A nervous palace maid entered. She couldn't have been older than 20. Her hands shook. Fear covered her face. The woman bowed deeply. "Your Majesty." Kael nodded. "Speak." The maid swallowed hard. Then looked toward Lyra. Guilt appeared in her eyes. A terrible guilt. The kind carried by someone who had remained silent for too long. "I saw what happened." Whispers instantly spread through the court. The maid continued. "I was working near the Eastern Gardens that night." Her voice shook. "I saw Lady Seraphine arguing with the servant." The entire room exploded. Gasps echoed everywhere. Nobles immediately started whispering. Several stood from their seats. Others stared at Seraphine in shock. The lunar candidate remained perfectly still. Only her eyes revealed the slightest hint of irritation. The maid lowered her head. "I was afraid." Tears appeared in her eyes. "I didn't speak because I feared losing my position." Kael watched carefully. The Alpha King had spent years judging truth and lies. And this woman wasn't lying. He could see it. More importantly, Seraphine could see it too. The situation was becoming dangerous. Very dangerous. Yet before anyone could continue, another guard rushed into the chamber. Breathing heavily. Urgent. Desperate. The courtroom immediately fell silent again. The guard dropped to one knee. "Your Majesty." Kael frowned. What happened? The answer changed everything. A wildfire has broken out near Black Pine Village. Shock spread instantly. The guard continued. "The fire is spreading rapidly." The courtroom atmosphere shifted at once. Politics no longer mattered. Accusations no longer mattered. Lives were in danger. Thousands of lives. Kael stood immediately. "How bad?" The guard swallowed. "The wind keeps pushing the flames toward the village." Several commanders exchanged grim looks. They understood exactly what that meant. Wildfires were monsters. Once they grew large enough, they became impossible to control. Kael turned toward his generals. "Mobilize the royal guard." Instant obedience followed. The courtroom emptied rapidly. Orders echoed through the palace. Soldiers rushed toward the stables. Messengers ran through corridors. The kingdom's strongest warriors prepared for battle. Because sometimes nature could be deadlier than any enemy. Hours later, dozens of royal units raced through the forests. Black smoke darkened the sky. The smell reached them long before the flames became visible. Then they saw it. A wall of fire. Massive. Hungry. Terrifying. Trees exploded into flames. Branches collapsed. Animals fled through the undergrowth. The fire consumed everything in its path. Lyra stared in horror. She had never seen destruction on such a scale. Finn sat beside her in the transport wagon. His small face had gone pale. "Lyra." She squeezed his hand. "It'll be okay." But even she wasn't certain. The closer they moved toward Black Pine Village, the worse everything became. Smoke covered the sky. The sun vanished. Ash drifted through the air like grey snow. By the time they arrived, panic had already spread. Villagers ran everywhere. Parents searched for children. Children searched for parents. Healers treated injuries. Warriors formed evacuation teams. The entire settlement had descended into chaos. Kael immediately took command. His voice cut through the panic like a blade. Move everyone north. Guards obeyed. Protect the children first. More obedience. Clear the eastern roads. Instant action followed. Lyra watched in amazement. The Alpha King transformed completely during crisis. There was no hesitation, no confusion, no uncertainty, only leadership, only strength, only purpose. And somehow that made her admire him even more. For hours the evacuation continued. Families escaped. Livestock were rescued. Injured villagers received treatment. Slowly, hope began returning. Then disaster struck. A scream echoed through the village. Everyone turned. A terrified woman ran toward the royal guards. My son. The woman could barely breathe. My son is still inside. Instant panic spread. Kael stepped forward. Where? The woman pointed toward a burning building. A storage house near the forest edge. The structure was already surrounded by flames. The roof had begun collapsing. Smoke poured from every opening. Several warriors looked toward it. Then quickly looked away. Because they knew. No one could survive inside. The woman collapsed to her knees. My baby. The cry shattered hearts. Lyra felt tears sting her eyes. Then she heard another voice. A familiar voice. Small. Terrified. Lyra. Her blood turned cold. She spun around. Finn was gone. Gone. The place where he had been standing moments earlier was empty. Pure panic exploded inside her. Finn. She searched desperately. Then she saw him. The child stood near the burning storage house. A falling beam crashed nearby. Villagers screamed. The ground shook. And before anyone could react, the entire front section collapsed. Smoke swallowed everything, including Finn. No. The scream tore from Lyra's throat. The world seemed to stop. For one terrible moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. Finn. The child who had become family. The child who trusted her. The child who had defended her when nobody else would. He was inside. Trapped. The realization hit like a knife. Around her, warriors exchanged uneasy looks. Nobody moved. The flames were too intense. Too dangerous. Entering now would mean death. Everyone knew it. Even Kael knew it. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. He began calculating options. Searching for a solution. But there wasn't enough time. The fire was spreading too fast. Too fast. Then Lyra started running. Kael's eyes widened. Lyra. She didn't stop. Several guards lunged forward. Too late. The Omega sprinted directly toward the inferno. Straight toward certain death. Shock spread through the crowd. What is she doing? Stop her. She'll die. But Lyra heard none of it. Her entire world had narrowed to one thought. Finn. Nothing else mattered. Not fear. Not pain. Not survival. Only Finn. Because once upon a time someone should have protected her. And nobody did. She refused to let the same thing happen to him. The flames roared as she entered the building. Heat slammed into her instantly. Smoke burned her lungs. Visibility vanished. Everything hurt. Everything burned. Yet she kept moving. Finn. No answer. The structure groaned dangerously. More beams collapsed. Sparks filled the air. Finn. Then. A weak cry. Lyra. Relief flooded her chest. She followed the sound. Through smoke. Through fire. Through pain. Finally she found him. Pinned beneath a fallen beam. Terrified. Crying. Alive. Lyra dropped to her knees. It's okay. The child sobbed. I was scared. Her heart shattered. I know. She grabbed the beam. Every muscle screamed. The wood barely moved. The fire continued spreading. Time was running out. Outside, Kael stared at the burning structure. For the first time since arriving, fear appeared in his eyes. Real fear. Not for himself. For her. The realization hit unexpectedly. Violently. He couldn't lose her. The thought arrived without permission. Without logic. Without warning. And once it appeared, it refused to leave. Moments felt like hours. The crowd watched helplessly. Smoke continued pouring from the building. No sign of movement. No sign of survival. Then suddenly, a figure appeared. Gasps erupted. The flames parted. And Lyra emerged carrying Finn in her arms. The entire village froze. Her clothes were burned. Her skin covered in soot. Blood stained one side of her face. Yet she remained standing. Barely. But standing. The crowd erupted. Shock. Disbelief. Admiration. Even warriors stared in awe. Because they understood what she had done. She had entered hell itself. And returned. For a child. For someone weaker than herself. For someone who needed her. Kael reached her first. Before she could collapse. Before she could hit the ground. The Alpha King caught her. Strong arms wrapped around her. Holding her securely. Protecting her. For a moment neither spoke. Neither moved. The world seemed to disappear. Lyra looked up at him through smoke and exhaustion. His eyes revealed something she had never seen before. Fear. Not fear of fire. Not fear of battle. Fear of losing her. The realization stunned both of them. A faint smile touched Lyra's lips. Then her strength vanished. Her body began falling unconscious. But before darkness claimed her completely, she whispered something. Soft. Weak. Yet powerful enough to stop Kael's heart. Is Finn safe? Not herself. Not her injuries. Not her pain. The child. Only the child. Even now. Even after everything. That was her first concern. Kael looked toward Finn. The boy was alive. Crying. Shaken. But alive. The Alpha King's voice became unusually gentle. Yes. A single tear slipped down Lyra's cheek. Then darkness claimed her. And she fell unconscious in the arms of the most powerful Alpha in the world. As Kael carried her toward the healers, an unfamiliar realization settled inside him. This Omega was changing everything. And for the first time in many years, the Alpha King was no longer fighting merely for a kingdom. He was fighting for someone. Someone who had somehow reached the heart he thought had turned to stone long ago. And somewhere deep inside the shadows of the palace, Seraphine learned what had happened. The news filled her with rage. Because the kingdom wasn't turning against Lyra. The kingdom was beginning to love her. And that was far more dangerous.